The first upgrade I'm going to do to the Worktable Sawmill is extend the bed rails. So using two of the rails that I picked up a little while ago, and in a previous video you saw me prepping them, we're going to be extending them. The current rails are 68 inches in length, and they give me the ability to cut a log that is almost 48 inches, so 20 inches shy of the length of the rail. So I'm extending with these new rails. I'm going to weld them on. They'll stick out over the ends of both ends of the table, and let me cut a log just over 6 feet long. So fundamentally, the length of the work table. If the log will fit on the work table, I'll be able to mill it. I thought about going 8 feet, but now I'm just starting to push things a little bit. So we'll start with these extensions to give us a 6 foot cut. I've prepared the metal here for welding, so I'm going to set that up and weld these in place. Of course, trying to get weld two pieces of angle iron together and keep it straight is always a challenge. So I'm going to be employing a couple more pieces of angle iron that I can clamp together, or clamp the pieces together like that and get a nice straight edge to do a little bit of tacking and then make sure things are really good and straight before doing the final weld. So I'll get on with that welding now. So I just learned firsthand what happens when you run out of argon on your TIG welder. You get all kinds of splattering going on, oxidation occurring like crazy. It just does not weld the same way at all. So out of argon, I'll have to get that refilled. But other than that, we do have this all welded up. So I'm just going to take this over the grinder, get that cleaned up, and we now have two extended bed rails. All right, we got a couple 8 foot bed rails. Actually, they're 2 inches shy of 8 feet. But that will let us cut a log that is 6 feet long. A couple more thoughts on the next upgrade using the bed rails for the Worktable Sawmill. That's going to be the clamps to hold the log down onto the table itself. In the last couple of videos you saw me using these, just literally screwed into the table with some wood screws. And then I subsequently just went to clamps like this and screwed those into the work table and somehow like that to hold the log on. So temporarily that worked, that did the trick, but I'm looking for a little bit more permanent and better solution, particularly when I want to start milling up flat and get 90-degree cuts. These weren't 90 degree, they were just a temporary quick hack to see if I could do something. So here's what I'm thinking. Two of the shorter rails are going to be put together like that, and they will sit on the table in that orientation. Here's some leftover bits from the treadmill. I'm going to make a cut of this right down there and just keep this square portion here. That part gets cut away. And that slips underneath. Sorry. That slips underneath these two rails. And you can see that hole there. That'll be drilled out just a little bit bigger to take a 1/4 inch and then tap with a 1/4 inch thread. That can slide up and down in here to give me some adjustability on a clamp that'll sit on top. I'm going to, again, using these leftover bits from the treadmill. This can be a piece that sits on the top and can be clamped down to apply pressure using this tongue portion. You can see that. So I can apply some pressure against the log, whether it's in this orientation and clamp it a little bit, or I may want to extend these a little bit and allow some pressure to be put up against the log in this direction. So I have some versatility with this piece in terms of how I want to orient it. Then I'm a little concerned about making 90-degree cuts. So here's my thought on that. So I'm going to have a flat bar, might make it that long, and I'm thinking to that I'm going to weld this coupler nut, weld that on here. I'll drill a hole here that can take this 1/4 inch bolt to screw into the plate underneath here to give us adjustability. Probably drill another hole back here that'll act as a guide to keep this piece straight as it moves up and down the rails. And then it'll be cut off about here. So it's not going to be really long, but just long enough. And then onto this bolt, I'm going to weld this piece here. So that will let this piece rotate up, be at 90 degrees, up against the flat face of the log that's just been cut off. And if it gets a little too high, I can move it down, keep it out of the way, and yet still maintain that flat face. So that's my thought. And gonna do a little bit more thinking about it, and then start putting together a prototype. So getting started on our our Worktable Sawmill log mounts, or log bracket. Starting off with these 4 pieces, gonna cut them off, then drill this hole out and tap it to a 1/4-20 thread. So I'll go over the grinder, angle grinder, and we'll cut these off with a cutoff disc. There's the first. I'll do 3 more of those. So I got the pieces cut off, but you can see there's a little bit of a ragged edge here. So I'm just going to run over to the belt sander and clean that up. And that's a much nicer finish. So I'll do the other 3, then we'll go to the drill press to drill out these holes. To drill this hole out for threading a 1/4-20 thread, we're using a 13/64 inch bit. So I have the appropriate tap here, but I've just a quirk of my own is that when I'm using a tap, I often find it difficult to get the tap perfectly vertical as I'm going through a piece, particularly when the piece is relatively thin like these brackets are. And I tend to get, offset a little. Of course, I'm exaggerating, but I get the thing offset a little bit and the hole doesn't go through perfectly straight. So what we'll do is we'll mount the tap in the drill press, and then I can just twist the drill press by hand to put that hole in, and I know that the tap is being held perfectly vertical. So let me get that set up. All right, I have the tap mounted in the drill press, little workpiece clamped down to the table. So let's see how this works. A little light pressure, and try turning them in. And there's the 4 lower brackets, cut, drilled, tapped. So with the lower bracket cut, and it'll sit underneath these rails with the bolt coming through, we'll work on this next piece that will be here to slide up against the log as it's held on the rack. And it'll be able to be a little bit of slop, so as you can see here, you can sit up like that, and as you tighten it, it'll clamp down and drive forward into the log. This is obviously when the log has gotten down pretty low, and we have a flat surface of the log there, so it'll have something to bite into. So to create 2 of these pieces, I'm going to drill out that hole a little better than 1/4 inch, and I'm going to cut off these 2 little tabs here. The next piece we're working on is the vertical bracket. It'll swing up like so, and allow us to get a straight edge on the log. So a couple bits to cut here. One is the little bracket here that's going to mount to the table. So I'm going to take this piece, cut it off. Here's the second piece. So we're going to make two of these brackets. And then we'll drill a hole here and here that will have a bolt going through into this bottom plate that sits underneath. So we'll start on these two pieces. We'll drill a hole, cut them, and then grind them clean. And then we'll grind this piece clean, cut off the head of the bolt, and then we can weld this coupler nut onto here and weld this bolt onto the bottom of there. So there's our pieces cut for the vertical brackets. Got one there, second one there. So I'll set up now and do the welding on those, get these pieces put together. And there we have the brackets all set to go. These, of course, now can flip up and down. Use a 7/16 inch wrench just to tighten them up when we get them into position. I also have the ability to put a jam nut on this to keep this firmly in position if it wants to be flopping around. So we'll play around with that a little bit. We'll slide up and down the rails, get tightened down by the clamps. So the next step in this process will be welding on little brackets onto the end here. That I still want to make sure that I have room that can slide right out, so they won't be completely welded shut, but there'll be a bracket welded on here, a bit of an angle so that I can then bolt it down or screw down into the work table itself. So we're coming along. Got some good use out of these bed rails and treadmill parts. And there we have it. Our mounting brackets are ready. We've got welded these little tabs in place on the end of the rails. These can now slide up and down the rail as required. These slide up and down the rail as required. These can tilt if needed, depending on the material being cut. Same with this one. And on this one I put in what do we call that? A clamping nut, jam nut. So I can put a jam nut in there too, I just haven't done that. Yeah, so I think what I'll do next is mount these to the table, put on the extended rails, and then I have a piece of pine that I'm going to cut. I haven't put up the new motor yet, but I think with the improvements to the rails, like the longer rails, the logging clamp mechanism, those are some good improvements, and will let me cut through pine without any trouble. So I'm going to set up a log and mill some of that up. All right, here's the first beam that we've got now set up in our new clamping mechanism. So we've got our vertical pieces holding on here. We got a vertical piece here. Got the two other pieces on the other side pushing up against that. We got the long rails installed. So I'll set up the camera and you can see me just take a thin slice off the very top of this log. With the new rails, we're getting a little bit of friction on them, so I'm just going to sand the top of the rails off a little bit. It's a little bit of a pebbly texture. The saw is just not moving as smoothly as I want, so I'm going to just do a little bit of adjustment on these rails. All right, I cleaned up the rails a little bit, just gave them a light sand just to kind of take off that surface paint. But I think I'm going to do a little bit more grinding on the side of the rails here, just where again, just taking off the paint. There are bearings that run on the inside of these rails and on the outside as well. So I'm just going to clean up those. I'm sorry I didn't get the camera running when I took off this little thin slice. I'll probably make an adjustment on these brackets as well. I think I'll make brackets that stand up a little bit higher and push in. These I'm not really comfortable with. They do have a little bit of slop there. So I want to fix up those brackets. But I'll call that the end of this upgrade. Upgrades 1 and 2, the long rails and log support. So the next bit will be putting in that motor. That's the next piece that I'm after. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.